what do you like about startups? What are you doing another one for?
I think there's two kinds of founders. The people who want to start startups for starting startups' sake, and the people who want to start startups because they have this deep belief about a product. Primarily, I'm doing this new startup because I can't get the idea out of my head.
I was convinced that we were doing something good. I was also convinced that I was not very good at fundraising.
There's this thing in fundraising where there's a whole lot of no's followed by the occasional yes, and then suddenly everything turns to yes.
I think I've gotten much tougher since I've been a CEO about rejection.
Hi, I'm Paul Bigger, founder of Circle CI.
I'm Edith Harbaugh, CEO and co-founder at Launch Darkly.
And you're listening to Be Continuous, a podcast about continuous delivery and software development.
You can get in touch with us anytime at our Twitter handle @ContinuousCast.
The show is brought to you by Heavybit. To learn more, visit heavybit.com. And while you're there, check out their library, home to great educational talks from other developer company founders and industry leaders.
So Paul, we were just talking about how hard startups are. And
What do you mean? Startups are wonderful.
yeah, great. Is that why you're starting another one?
Well, no. I recognize that startups are fucking awful in so many ways, but sometimes you like to build shit.
So let's dive into this because here we are doing our podcast.
Our startup-ish podcast.
Yeah. So what do you like about startups? What are you doing another one for?
Well, primarily I'm doing this new startup because I can't get the idea out of my head, which is the same reason I did Circle. Circle had been in my head for a good year, but before I actually did it. So I think that's a really good reason to do a startup. Like lots of people I want to do a startup, but don't necessarily have an idea. And that's not a bad reason to do a startup, but it's not how I think about them.
So this will actually be your third startup.
This will be my fourth startup.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did you have a startup back in Ireland that we don't talk about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I started up with a total of 6 of us right after college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Tell me a story, Paul.
6 of us started a thing after college. So it was let's consult while we figure out a product. And after about 4 or 5 months, I realized I was on a different page than the rest of them on many things. And a couple of them work at Circle now.
Were you in the same book?
What?
Well, you said you were on the different page.
We were kind of in the same book, yeah. But we thought about the world in different ways, in lots of ways. So.
And now a couple are at Circle?
Now a couple are at Circle, yeah.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I always see people downstairs at Heavybit with Circle jackets. Do you know them, or are they just...
They work for serverless. So they are former Circle employees who found their way over to serverless.
How does that make you feel?
That's good. It's good. Yeah. I mean, it's good that they still wear their jackets. It means they're proud of the history.
Or just they don't have many jackets.
Maybe, but there's a bunch of, former Circles that... this is the thing, when you have a startup in the Valley, people find their way to other companies. And so, a former employee works at Rainforest. No one yet on the Launch Darkly team?
We pretty much have our original team.
Oh, wow.
But I came out of TripIt, and one of the things the TripIt founders are proud of is that of about 25 people who were there, I think 8 have gone on to start companies.
Oh, wow. That's really good.
So I hope that Launch Darkly has a similar record.
But the people who started companies, do you think that they fucking hate startups?
So it's funny. So I actually gave a talk recently on how I failed at running 100 miles.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I thought this was just me talking about failure.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And everybody found it incredibly inspiring.
Interesting.
And I thought it was me just talking about how I'd failed.
The Silicon Valley fetishization of failure.
Well, I talked about how I'd failed repeatedly.
Okay, you kept going.
I'd failed 3 times at running 100 miles.
This reminds me of the story about the FedEx founder who everything was going to fail, but they were about to run out of cash, but he took all of his remaining money, brought it to Vegas, bet it on red, doubled it, and then had payroll.
I just ran a lot. I mean, I didn't go to Vegas.
It's keep going no matter what. Actually, so I think one of the worst things about Silicon Valley is that it celebrates failure in a way. So I think an allowance of failure, a belief that failure is a positive thing or is a learning experience or that sort of thing. But lots of people, I think, have swung too far in the opposite direction, and it sort of puts failure on some sort of pedestal.
Well, that's the funny thing is, so what happened was I was trying to run these 100 miles when I'd started my company, Launch Darkly. And it was really hard in the early days. Mm-hmm. So it was John, my co-founder, and me. We were living off...
You mean startups are really hard?
Both.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's changed.
It was John and me. We were living off our savings. He'd left a very well-paying job at Atlassian, so I had this kind of weight of guilt on my shoulders. Like, I got my friend to give up a high-paying job.
Right. But he's a co-founder. At least I feel it's a bit different when you have employees who you convince to give up whatever they had going to join your ship.
And we were starting to hire our first employees, and I felt an immense amount of guilt.
What was the guilt about? So Launch Darkly hadn't quite kicked off yet. It was not the success that it is today.
Oh, I mean, in the beginning, it was John and I sitting in a co-working space. Like, we had no customers, we had no revenue, we had no product. Like, all we had was this idea.
Right.
And that's when I got into more, like, I'd run many races, but that's when I'm like, I could run 100 miles because I didn't have any money. So, like, I couldn't really go out to dinner.
Oh, right, I see, yeah.
I couldn't travel.
Yeah.
But, running is pretty cheap. So I could just put in all these miles. And it was when I was trying to fundraise. And I just remember how crushed I was because I went to run this 100-mile race right in the middle of my friends and family round, and I didn't finish the race. I dropped at mile 70. And it was such a low point. It was like, my round isn't coming together. I can't finish 100 miles.
Yeah.
Utter failure.
Wow.
And I told this story to some of the very people who turned me down.
Yeah.
And they loved it. They applauded.
Well, because you kept going and you got through it.
But it was amazing. Literally, I remember this low point where every day I would go into work, I'm like, I'm an awful CEO and I'm an awful runner.
I mean, they wouldn't have applauded it if you hadn't been giving, the kind of CEO who's able to give this sort of talk a couple of years later. Like, that failure fetishization forgets that 90% of the people in the same story do go nowhere and end up failing.
Is that it? I mean, because I didn't talk about the company at all. I just talked about...
Yeah, but I mean, you're on the stage. You must have done something.
No, it was just like a small gathering of like 50 people.
Okay.
At a retreat that SoftTech does.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you're on the SoftTech retreat, I think there's enough social capital given to your story that all these people are listening to you in the first place. And
yeah, but it was just so hard in the beginning because there's the guilt that I was recruiting people who were giving up a lot to be on this journey with me.
I had that fundraising guilt as well. So about 2 or 3 weeks into my seed round, I started off with some really good momentum, got featured on Angellist, got a verbal offer of a term sheet that seemed to take a long, long time to come. And so about a month about a month into it, I was at this low point of most of my warm leads are turning colder and colder. There's almost no committed money. In fact, there might have been $0 committed at that point. And there's this thing in fundraising, and I'm sure you've seen this, where there's a whole lot of no's followed by the occasional yes, and then suddenly everything turns to yes.
FOMO. That's called FOMO.
FOMO, right, exactly. Investors are sheep, just like everyone else. And so when there's nobody, no one wants to be the first person to do it. But when you're in that thing constantly getting no, and you're starting to think maybe this isn't a great idea.
No, I got more pissed off.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was like, this is a good idea.
Well, it's not that the startup itself isn't a good idea, but just that sort of fear and anxiety of maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I can't do this startup. Maybe they're right that there's no market for this or whatever. No,
I was convinced that we were doing something good. I was also convinced that I was not very good at fundraising. So I was very determined that I would get better at fundraising. So,
okay.
So running was something I could control because I could...
Yeah.
I could get better at it.
So getting good at fundraising is something you can get better at.
Yeah.
Well, that's absolutely true, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just okay, I'm not very good at this right now.
Yeah.
I will get better at it. But yeah, the beginning is tough. You're this unknown company with no product.
Well, there's so many things that are just like this, where you feel that you're failing your team, you feel that you're you haven't rolled out a new internal initiative, right? Maybe there's a new process and it fails, or you roll something out and people hate it. And then you just feel like a fucking asshole. You feel like everything's falling down around you and that it's all your fault.
So I have something that helps me a lot because I do feel the same way is that I will find new ways to fail.
Okay.
Like, I hate failing, but as long as I admit something didn't work and I'm willing to try something else.
So taking the view that it's all kind of a learning experience and that you're getting better at it and you don't make the same mistake twice, that kind of thing.
Well, sometimes you make the same mistake 3 or 4 or 5 times, but like,
Yeah.
at least you realize. And I think that's part of being a CEO is that the job I have today is very different than the job I had 2 years ago.
Oh, it's insane how quickly it changes.
Yeah.
It's like you've just started to get good at something and now you don't do it anymore.
But that's fun. If it was always the same job, it would be boring.
Well, yeah, but I found one of the simultaneously a great thing and a shitty thing about being a CEO is that because of that constant learning curve, it's always hard. Like learning is always difficult. You're always doing it wrong. And if you're going to start a new thing, you're going to have to learn and you're going to have to do it wrong. But because we're switching between things so often and we have new jobs every 3 months or whatever, we're constantly doing it wrong. There's no time to settle down and like we're getting this right.
But I think that's fun.
I mean, yeah, but it's also fucking awful.
I think the only way that you can survive it is, so that was one of the questions after my talk was like, why did you run 100 miles? I was like, because it's fun. It's like running a startup. Right. Like it's hard, but it's hard and it's fun at the same time.
The thing that really worked for me around that sort of failure was whenever I found it difficult to do a thing or difficult to be motivated to do the thing, I would say, you know, am I going to fail my team and my company and my investors and all these things because I didn't want to, you know, fill in the blank?
Yeah.
Right. You know, I was nervous about emailing this investor.
Yeah.
Do I want to fail my startup because I was too nervous to send an email? And that sort of like shamed me a little bit into pushing through.
Yeah, so that actually ties back to you. So I was running 100 miles and you'd written me a note before, like, you know, good luck. Just
Okay.
a standard nice note. And at mile 40, I was thinking about dropping out. Like I was throwing up. It was 97 degrees. I was in a bad state. And I was like, I don't want to write Paul and tell him that I dropped out. I'll keep going.
Right. Nice.
So you shamed me into...
Oh, good. I'm not sure if shaming another person is the same as sort of shaming yourself.
Well, it was definitely peer pressure because I'm like, I don't want to, you know, and I had this, but that metaphor is carried on because, you know, it's very popular to write all these failure posts.
Yeah.
Like to your point about the fetishization of like, right, like, oh, I didn't do this. And
how
the
we
company
failed to do X and how I didn't get into Y Combinator and that sort of thing.
So always when I'm faced with something that I don't really want to do, like there's certain things I just hate doing. But I'll think, do I want to think back? My company did not succeed just because I had a mental block around blah.
So one of the things that you mentioned is how hard it is to sell to developers.
Yeah. Well, I think there's 2 types of developers. There's developers that want to build it themselves, and there's developers that don't want to build it themselves.
Okay.
And depending on what you're doing, they could be the same developer.
Depending on how you spin it or something like that?
No, just depending on the maturity of your product, the maturity of the category. Like I remember when people used to build their own application servers.
Yeah.
Nobody does it now.
Certainly with Circle, we found it very hard to get people to give up their code, which you need for CI, obviously. But once the company got mature enough or it had a bit of like stuff behind, a bit of backing, they'd heard of it from someone. Like today, no one asked this question, but the first 6 months of Circle, that was the only question. Was, you know, I don't know about giving my code to some third party.
Yeah, I think every developer tool has some sort of maturity level where everybody thinks there's no way in hell that I could have somebody else handle this.
Right.
Like
but when you're in that early stage and like people are just telling you no for some random reason and you're just like, you don't really know, and this is especially true for people who used to be product people, who used to be engineers, like people just constantly telling you no, it's not what your job typically is. And so it's a shitty new part of being a founder, as a first-time founder.
Oh, it's a huge transition.
Yeah.
Like it's a huge transition. Like, so a conversation I had with an old boss of mine was, so I was an engineer and then I was a product manager. And he's like, well, as a product manager, you're used to fighting for your projects and them not always happening.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, but you have a much better success ratio.
Right, yeah, exactly. You might get 1 in 3, 1 in 4. But when you have 10, 20 customers in a row telling you, now's just not a good time.
It's funny, I think I've gotten much tougher since I've been a CEO about rejection.
Right, yeah. Now you have all these employees who are saying no or potential hires that are saying no.
Actually, no, we do very well with recruiting.
Oh, I'm just mocking you. I actually have no information here. I just assume that at some point, I mean, we found, even when people got like super excited about Circle, it was still a 50%.
Really?
Yeah.
We have a pretty good hit rate.
Interesting.
I was more talking the thing that taught me about both customers and investors. And job interviews as well is it's not always no, it's sometimes not right now. Or just
I've had a bunch of no's or not right nows be, a couple of months later, actually now's a good time. I've been rethinking my current company. This startup isn't a good idea and I want to join your startup and that sort of thing.
Yeah, or just like when I was raising my seed round, I was talking to a lot of A investors, and our mutual friend Matt actually told me, he's like, Edie, you're talking to the wrong investors.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, you should be talking to seed funds, not these.
Yeah,
and
not VCs.
Well, it's still VCs, but
well, yeah.
And I was just like, oh, you're right.
Yeah,
and that's just a recaliber of not everybody needs a feature flagging. Not everybody is right to join Launch Darkly.
Yeah. Not everyone needs to raise from Series A investors.
Yeah, and then like the people who I talked to 2 years ago when we were doing our seed fund are totally wrong to talk to now.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So what's it like for you? What's motivating you to start another company?
What's motivating me to start another company? It's entirely about the product. I guess both the product and the mission. So the mission is huge. It's a much bigger thing than anything I've worked on. And so like the closest parallel I can find at Mozilla, our mission was to keep the web open. And I think that's the same level of mission that Dark is what my startup's going to be called.
I like that name.
The code name.
I like the name. It sounds familiar.
It does, yeah. I don't know why that is, but a number of people from your team have mentioned it. And
maybe it's because you're wearing your Launch Darkly shirt today.
Maybe that's it, yeah.
So I'm staring at the word dark on your Launch Darkly shirt.
Oh, yeah. No, I hadn't. Dark is a substring of Launch Darkly. I hadn't realized that.
Oh, well, thanks for wearing your shirt today.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, somebody actually wrote in asking for a shirt.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
If you're interested in a To Be Continuous shirt or a Launch Darkly shirt or a Circle CI t-shirt, send us a note on Twitter.
Yeah, we don't actually have To Be Continuous shirts though.
Oh no, but if enough people ask for one, we'll make them.
How lean of you.
Exactly. So after Circle, I think a lot of people, they're always fighting the battles of their last relationship. Okay. And with startups, that means that people are looking to not do a startup afterwards. You see this a lot. People want to be, startup founders who fail to get product market fit. They're like, I want to be an employee, or I want to work at a place that already has product market fit, or I want to work on something that isn't such a big idea, but is rather, or maybe I don't want to work in consumer. I want to be in B2B, or I don't like B2B. I want to be in consumer. People just, they do the opposite. So I expected that after Circle, I would want to do a not venture-backed startup. And it's not that I have anything against VCs or any of that sort of thing, but it is definitely a challenge building a growth startup. The venture model is inherently tied to growth, and with growth, you always have what have you done for me lately?
Yep. And
we grew 50% last year, or 3x last year, or whatever it is. It's okay, now for this year's 3x.
And in fact, the fact that you grew very rapidly last year puts more expectations.
That's right. Yeah. And all sorts of similar things. And a lot of people, when they start startups, they start them with this sort of expectation of, you're doing your own thing.
No.
You didn't want to do your own thing?
No, you're not.
Oh, you're not. Exactly.
You're
exactly.
not.
You've got a board. There's
employees,
investors, customers. Yeah.
You know the old joke, right? About hospitals?
No.
They could get a lot more done without all these darn patients.
Right, exactly. And so there's all this stuff that isn't startups, that isn't product.
Yeah, it's funny. I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this story, but do you know Heidi Rosen?
Yeah.
I love her.
Heidi's awesome.
So she was telling me a story about starting a company with her brother. And before you said, well, you should start it with somebody you've known all your life. I mean, who have you known all your life? But
yeah, sibling.
But it turned out that he just wanted to build his own thing. And he didn't really want to do anything else.
But when you've got a board, you're not building your own thing. You're building for the contract that you had with the board members, essentially.
Yeah, and you're building. The board is just other people's money.
Yes, yeah.
It's pension funds. It's universities.
You're probably 10 steps away from pension, or at least 3 steps away from pension funds. But yeah, that's essentially who it is at the end of the day.
Closer than you think. So I went to a SoftTech event, and they had all these football players there. And I asked why, and they're like, well, because they're LPs.
Oh, hilarious.
So they had Ronnie Lott, who's a 4-time Super Bowl winner, hanging out at SoftTech.
What team does he play for?
He was the Super Bowl champion at the 49ers.
Okay. that makes sense that celebrities in the area would be investing into startups.
Yeah, I mean, what else are they going to do? Like,
So you have investors, and you also have the team, right?
who depends on you?
Right. And so one of the problems that we had is that the sort of contract that we had with the team wasn't necessarily the same contract as we had with the investors.
Tell me more.
Well, we were very into flat at the start.
Oh.
And yeah, I know. It's a constant problem that everyone has. If you're thinking of doing a flat startup, say no, or at least heed the following advice. We never said what flat was.
Oh.
Yeah, so it turns out that loads of people who started had different ideas about what it meant to be flat.
Oh.
And so then we in the pursuit of growth and startupness and all this sort of thing, which I think, to be fair, I hadn't really identified as that important at the start. It was in the back of my head, but it wasn't a thing we necessarily talked about. When you're pre-product market fit, you think a lot about product, and then when you are post Series A, you think a lot about growth. And when you're pre-product, growth isn't at the top of your mind, but so it's a thing that we didn't necessarily talk about at the start when we hired people.
When you say growth, do you mean of the company?
Of the company, just like as a startup, right? Part of what you're doing in being a startup is you're trying to, at the risk of giving a cliche, you're trying to change the world in some way. You're trying to build a product that affects people and that makes some engineers' lives in your customers' companies better in some way. Not necessarily the biggest change in the world. You're not curing cancer, but you want to have some sort of impact.
Yeah.
And part of that impact is reaching more and more people.
Yep.
And that's kind of why I got into things, but I didn't necessarily think of growth as it. So when we talked to our early employees, early hires, that sort of thing, we weren't really harping on the growth bandwagon, but we were harping on the flat bandwagon because that's how we believed in the world. And so when it came time to focus on growth, that was a shift from what we had been doing so far. And in many ways, that was a shift that contradicted people's definitions of flat.
Yes.
And that's inevitable if you have 10 people. I mean, we had 10 people, we probably had 10 different definitions of flat.
She probably actually had 20.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, depending on the day of the week and
what they'd read lately and who they'd talked to.
Exactly. So there's all these people that you're serving who have completely different criteria. And so between your employees, your investors, even things like your spouses and partners and families and so on, and vendors, customers, like you're serving kind of all these people in a certain way, and you're never really just serving yourself.
Oh no.
Right. But a lot of people start startups because they're like, I want to be my own boss.
Oh no.
And that's a terrible reason to start a startup.
No, I mean, I think that works if you're not employing anybody.
Maybe. I had a dream for a long time of how can we have a startup which has no employees and no customers?
How do you make money?
Don't know. That's kind of the challenge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the only thing where you can do that is some sort of arbitrage, but that feels like a shitty business model.
Yeah, even my friend has started a business where they're a consultant now, but she's even more beholden because she has to go find work, and then she has contracts with customers, and she has to fulfill the customer.
Right, and you have to get a renewal for that contract, and yeah.
Yeah, so is she her boss? And I mean, is she her own boss? Yeah.
Yeah.
But does she get to control everything? No.
So there's a bunch of different challenges there. Let's talk about the employee one for a second. So you start off and there's maybe an idea that employees work for you.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
So
right.
Have you heard of the idea of a servant leader?
Well, yes. That's exactly.
That's where all right. We get to trail off into agreeing with each other.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend earlier, and I'm definitely not going to name names, but he worked at this startup who had the very opposite of a servant leader. The leader would send misogynistic emails to employees, amongst other things. He would yell at people in meetings, people were crying all the time, and half the company just got up and left. And I don't really understand how anyone could be like that, or how anyone could think that was a successful model. But definitely anyone who is a successful leader in maybe a leader in general, but certainly in a startup is the very opposite of that.
Well, I mean, I think some are. I mean, Steve Jobs was notorious.
I feel that Steve Jobs is going to be the biggest disservice to startup founders that there ever was, but by his example.
I think so too. I remember an old company. So I've always been big on iteration and lean and cycles.
Oh, right, yeah.
And somebody else is like, well, Steve Jobs didn't do this. Why don't you just pick a direction and be firm? And I'm like, dude, I called him, didn't answer. He's dead.
Wow. Too far. It's too soon.
I told him I would get him into Flour and Water.
Yeah.
Because there's this famous shot of Flour and Water, this Italian restaurant in the Mission. There's this famous shot of him getting turned away at the door.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Did he not have a jacket or something?
No, they are really tough to get a reservation. They have half walk-ins. And he showed up too late.
And just like, no.
So it's like, but if Steve Jobs was alive.
Yeah.
And I got him dinner there, I still couldn't do that every night. I'd still want to iterate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's iteration and being the asshole leader. But between all that, the thing that you imagine about your startup of like, I'm going to be this thought leader and in your most ego-full day of looking at Larry Page or Mark Zuckerberg or something and thinking like that's what it's like to be. No, it's never been like that.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. I think I have the best job on the planet, but I think when you start a company. So I started off in engineering, then I was in product, and there would be these floors of other people in accounting, and I was just like, what do they do all day?
Right.
Now, after like having to do it myself, I'm like, oh.
Yeah. So our first hire was the everything else person.
Which we should have hired eons ago.
So good. Like I've never run payroll once.
What are you going to do now?
Well, so I'll have a co-founder and they will run payroll.
So
or they will hire someone who will run payroll. Like one of these options, definitely.
Where are you going to get the money for all these hires?
So fundraising I can do. Just running payroll I can't do.
Payroll is actually very easy.
Okay. Fundraising is actually relatively easy.
No, if you really, I'll show you how to run payroll.
Okay.
But like the thing is,
and I can show you how to fundraise.
The thing is, to run payroll, you have to have money. Like we didn't run payroll for a while because we weren't drawing a salary.
Yeah. So the first employee did so much in the company.
What made you decide to get in everything else as the first instead of an engineer? Because
so it's the idea is keeping the most important thing, and doing kind of all the shit that you have to. There's so much shit that you have to do with a startup. So like getting an office is a really good example of this. It takes a lot of work to like push that project through.
Oh yeah.
And it goes wrong in so many ways, but it has to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If you don't get an office, there's nowhere for employees to work, or making sure that you have an internet connection in your office, and having a secondary internet connection, and all this shit.
Well, are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yeah, it's a good way of thinking about it. So the important thing at your startup is like level 4, level 5, but you can't do that if your employees are worried about level 1.
Yeah, if you're like, I don't have a place to go to work, and the internet doesn't work.
Yeah.
Those are just basic stress.
Right, exactly. So you need to solve those, but they're not the most important thing.
Well, the most important thing is you have a product that customers like. That
right,
you can
exactly. So you always want to stay focused on that. And so you hire someone to take care of the other stuff.
I should have done that far sooner. I think... let me give a nuanced answer. I think things have gotten much more outsourceable than they were even 5 years ago.
True.
But I think even these outsourced systems still need a level of care.
They need a manager to take care of them. And yeah.
Like even if you have an outsourced bookkeeper, you still need somebody to review the books.
Yeah. Even with an outsourced bookkeeper, you need someone has to do the reconciliation.
Yeah.
Someone has to say how much the salespeople's commissions are.
Yeah, I did that until very recently. I did that. And there's just stuff that you don't realize how much time it really takes. Like the bulk of our business is not self-serve, but through order forms. That just takes time.
Wow, you should have done like this a bottom-up, dev-focused startup. That would have been better.
We tried.
I know.
We tried, but it turned out people wanted to pay us.
I mean, even when you think that there's a startup that does this, inevitably someone needs to manage the 20 or 30 different vendors that you use to do this, between your lawyers, your payroll, your accounting, the office, the food.
Or I'll give you a really simple example. Like we wanted to set up a 401k because our employees wanted it. So we're like, great, we'll set up a 401k. Everybody will be happy. It turns out that even if it's totally automated, there's still some paperwork you still have to fill out.
Yep.
Like the government makes you fill out stuff that basically says that you're in compliance with various rules. You have to get a bond so that if you go out of business, none of which is complex, but all of which is just time.
Right, yeah. There's this tendency in startups to defer everything until it actually is important, right? It's kind of one of those things that startups do, and in many ways it's probably illegal, but you do it anyway, and everyone kind of tolerates it because you can generally fix it at the end. But that means that a lot of times, and a situation will come up that needs to be dealt with right now.
Well, I think there are some basic social contracts you have with everybody. So like with stuff we could not defer, like our employees needed health insurance.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Like that's something I took very seriously.
Well, I think that's a really good example because we didn't have health insurance until we got an employee. We're hiring employees and the employees are like,
oh yeah,
we need health insurance.
Yeah, so
and
like,
they're like, well, of course you need health insurance. We will get right on that.
Yeah, it was the same. Like, so beginning it was John and I, my co-founder, and we were paying Cobra through our old jobs. Easy peasy.
Yeah.
And then we wanted to start hiring, and they said, hey, they had kids. They're like, can you get us health insurance?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by social contract.
Yeah.
That's not something that you could punt on because they want to go to the doctor.
Well, we had a good example of that. The day that the first employee came in and said that they were pregnant. And they're like, what is your pregnancy policy? And I'm like, I don't know, but we will have a very good and fair one. And I had, so Genevieve was our first employee, and Genevieve was someone that you could just hand anything like this and she would come out with this amazing, like, compromise that, well, not so much compromise, but, that took into account all of the things and was like very employee fair and that sort of thing. I was like, this will be excellent because Genevieve will take care of it.
Yeah.
And that was like really, really comforting, I think, to all the employees.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, I made two mistakes. And I don't know if they're mistakes, but just, I think I underestimated how much of this other stuff time sucked up.
Oh, yeah, so much.
And then, like, I believed in the hype. Like, so we were a Zenefits customer.
Oh, right, I see.
And in my mind, I thought of Zenefits as like applying for a credit card.
They'll do everything for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have to input some fields.
Yeah.
No.
It's the same with Stripe. Right, you use Stripe and it's like Stripe will handle everything, and then you're like, oh, I need better reporting, or the board needs accrual-based accounting. So I don't know what accrual-based accounting is, but there's no button for it in the Stripe dashboard.
I keep looking for this button. I keep right-clicking. Yeah, like something we do by hand right now, and John Sheehan actually tweeted about this, and I tweeted back, like, please fix this. Was we reconcile our Stripe accounts with our invoice accounts because I need a consolidated revenue sheet.
I swear I heard that Stripe was doing invoices like 3 years ago.
Really?
I mean, I don't see it, so perhaps not. But
am I just like clicking in the? Maybe I'm double clicking in the wrong
looked at the
page.
Stripe account in quite some time. So there's this idea that like being a startup CEO is some kind of glamorous job.
I think when people think about that, they think of the Series C or D. Like, they think of the Intercom guys now.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like, so you're friends with the Intercom team, right?
Yeah, so I sat across from Owen when Owen was the only person in their San Francisco office.
Yeah, so
we were sitting in an investor office a couple of blocks up from here in the Stork building. And, like, it was me and Alan and him and Macy. And that was the San Francisco team of Intercom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was it glamorous?
So I feel to a certain extent Owen always had some sort of like aura about him. Like you could tell just from talking to Owen that Intercom was going to be an amazing company.
Interesting.
But I mean, certainly his job was lots of difficult shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the early startup founder.
Yeah. I mean, the early startup founder is, I remember I got absolutely furious at our mutual friend Fred once. He's like, Edith, you look so stressed. You just need to hire somebody to do this, and this. And I was just like, dude, with what money?
This is hilarious because
I
remember chatting to Fred about this, and he's like, we're kind of trying to transition from seeds to Series A. And I'm like, here's what you do. Here's what your organization looks like. And I knew this because I'd failed to do this. Right. And I was like, here is what we should have done and what everyone else is doing. And he's like, this is amazing. And then he just did it. And like, yeah, life seems amazing.
Yeah. But like, there's a stage before that when you're scrapping, when you're like, you're and your co-founder and you don't have any money. It's like, well, yeah, sure. Life would be grand if I hired, these 20 people, but I don't.
Well, what you should do is get 10 million from Sequoia.
Just off the bat?
Yeah.
Just why Sequoia and why 10 million?
Those are just particular numbers that came to mind in the context of the conversation that we were having.
Really? Do you have 10 million from Sequoia?
No, we don't. We have 18 million from DFJ and Scale.
What?
That was our Series B.
Oh, I thought you meant you personally right now.
Me personally? No. I'm talking about Circle CI.
I thought you were dropping like some big hint about funding.
Oh no, I've talked to investors, but very much not as a I would like your money sort of thing.
So I do think that life gets easier somewhat on some vectors when you get more funding or more, and I say funding loosely, either from VC or from customers.
Yeah.
Like it's like the old rule of when you get more money, you can offload and get more and more leverage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On the other hand, then you have new different challenges.
Right. Yeah, it's that learning thing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, once you're a Series C or D, you can like swan around the conference circuit and people listen to you as a thought leader and...
Yeah, but then also you have all this weight of, okay, now I have to make 100 million, 200 million.
Right. I think Twitter is an excellent example of this.
Oh, tell me.
Well, I remember, I don't know if you've read Hatching Twitter or something about their troubles, but the point at which we enter this story, Jack is back in the CEO seat, has been for a year or two or whatever, and they're now going to their S1.
Yep.
So they're about to IPO, and Jack is invited to speak at Startup School. And they're in their quiet period before the IPO, so he can't talk about Twitter at all. And so like he's giving this talk to a room full of, I don't know, 1,000 people, something like that, and also live streamed on the internet, and he can't talk about Twitter at all. So what he ends up talking about is like he plays some jazz for us, and he reads a passage from his favorite book. And there's something else that was like equally ridiculous. And half the room were like Jack fanboys. Like they were loving it. Like every word that came out of his mouth, they were sitting there like part of the experience.
It was a Jack fest.
It was. They were basking in the experience of the Dorsiness. And then the other half of the room is like, what the fuck is this shit?
Self-indulgent.
So, yeah, exactly. It was. I mean, I don't know exactly if I would call it self-indulgent because it was in the quiet period. He couldn't talk about Twitter and had to find something. But on the other hand, Jack does have a bit of a reputation.
There's many things to talk about besides your company. Mm-hmm. Like the talk I gave about running 100 miles.
There we go. Like, you could have played your favorite bit of jazz. Let it move the audience.
I don't jazz.
Yeah, so I think that there's that point where your fanboys are swanning over you, but then like 3 years later, the market has expectations and you're not meeting the expectations and the chickens are coming to roost, perhaps.
Well, I will say something that our advisor, Sean Burns, told me, which is
Don't work at Uber?
was to celebrate the wins because...
I've heard this. This is good. We were very bad at this and I think need to be much better at it.
Well, I don't mean be too self-congratulatory, but I mean, startups are really hard.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Have you lived it?
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't have those moments where you look back on and like, that was a good day, like the bad days can seem really bad.
Yeah. I think this is the reason to have a co-founder as well. That when you have a really great co-founder and a great relationship with your co-founder, it's much, much easier to handle the downs of a startup, of which there are many, 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 many.
Sometimes I think the startup is the hardest and funnest thing I've ever done.
I think that's a good example. It's like, you know when you get off a roller coaster and you're like, that was tough. You know that kind of roller coaster, like it's too big a roller coaster. No? Am I alone in this? Okay. You know when you go to Six Flags and once you get off the roller coaster, they allow you get back on if there's a spare seat.
And sometimes you don't want to get it back on.
Exactly. Yeah. So like you do it once, that was amazing. You do it twice, that was amazing. You do it the third time, it's like, what the fuck was I thinking?
Well, because it's your inner ear.
Right. And there's this point, I think startups are like this, that you eventually leave the roller coaster. Everything is wonderful and continues being wonderful. It may be challenging, it may be difficult, but it's rewarding and you learn a lot. But eventually, you've stayed on the roller coaster too long and you need to get off.
Well, I mean, honestly, though, what I found, though, is working at other people's companies was that it was still a roller coaster, but that I was not in control of it.
Well, this was you were working at startups. You could work at a nice, boring job.
Even boring jobs, like industries change. Mm-hmm. Like suddenly what was a very steady job is not.
Mm-hmm. Like owning a taxi medallion, maybe.
Yeah, that seemed like a sure bet once.
Yeah.
You know, what's going to happen? There's
Now
only
you've
so many.
lost all your money.
There's only so many taxi medallions. What could possibly go wrong? No, I'm serious. Like,
I know. I understand it. Yeah.
Like you lived in New York City, right? Like those would go for like $200K because like there's only so many taxis. This is a gold mine. And then what happened? Uber.
Apart from all of the ups and downs, I think that the hardest thing for me was moving away from product.
Tell me more.
So I think there's two kinds of founders. The people who want to start startups for starting startups' sake, and the people who want to start startups because they have this deep belief about a product or maybe a subject area or something like that.
Well, so let me subdivide that. I think there's three reasons people start startups.
Okay.
They want to get rich.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think getting rich is a sort of a lower level thing for everyone.
No,
like no one is really invested in like not being rich.
But I think some people are like, so let me subdivide.
Okay.
I think everybody has a primary, secondary, and tertiary.
Okay. Good way of putting it.
And you want to get super rich. Like, and they have this fantasy of like being, the Snap dude.
Yeah.
Who, like,
dating supermodels. And
on a yacht, popping bubbly.
Yeah.
Like, you want to get famous. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, oh, I'll be on TV all the time.
Yeah. People will listen to my jazz.
And then there's people who want to make stuff. And I think every startup founder is some combination of these three.
Yeah, I think that's true. And there's the people for whom product is number one. They all have to move off product at some point. And I think that that's a real challenge. I certainly found it a real challenge. You know that adage about working on what's urgent versus what's important.
Yep.
Right. What's important has to change around probably a little bit after you get product market fit, or you get the first like really good product. You start to have to work on the company.
Yep. The company is your product.
The company is your product. That's a good analogy that I've heard before that I actually don't like, because I don't like working on the company.
Well, I think of it as a type of creation.
Sure, but it's not the product that you're in love with.
But I think for me, what I realized that it gave me just as much joy and happiness.
It did not do that for me.
Like the thought that we're creating this thing in the world that's our culture. That's our.
Well, it's one or two levels of abstraction away from it. So it's like you like helping people, so you build a product to help them. So then you build this organization that builds that product, and then you
realize that
manage the people who are actually building the organizations that build the product, and then they're building organizations that I don't know. Well, there's a lot of levels of abstraction.
It's like you're building a factory that makes little factories.
That's right, exactly. Yeah.
The thing that gives me happiness is that like by having an organization, I can make more products.
Yes. So there's this game, still is this game on Steam called Factorio.
By the way, Paul, you are a brilliant game player.
Thank you.
I am far better at punning, but like you're far better at games.
So context for people at home.
Is that there's no context. I was just like this.
I absolutely destroyed Edith at Settlers of Catan the other night, and I think she's bitter.
No, I'm a better punter.
Mm-hmm. You definitely are a better punter.
I was just saying, like, I don't know how you're so much better at games.
Yeah, I don't either. Anyway,
like, do you hold a game board in your head and you're thinking ahead, or is it rote learning, or?
I think it's just experience. I actually don't like to focus too much on. I think it's hard. This startup analogy coming.
Incoming startup analogy.
I really enjoy playing games, but I don't enjoy. I don't enjoy like managing them too much. Like I don't enjoy the process of like managing, of trying to win the game. I just like try to play as well as I can.
Oh no, you like winning. You talked about it.
I absolutely do like winning, but I don't enjoy. Let me give an analogy to my analogy. So when you're selling, right? I enjoy being in the room. I enjoy making the pitch. I don't enjoy running the pipeline.
Interesting.
And so in a game, there's a certain amount of running the pipeline. You have to get a couple of levels of abstraction and away from the actual activities. And I just enjoy the activity. And I think this is the same for me in a startup. Third.
Your analogy has looped back on itself.
We've come back to what the analogy was analogizing about. I really enjoy the process of like doing the activity of the startup. So building the product. or the purpose of the startup, building the product. I enjoy doing that. But when you start being at the level where you're organizing the processes that then cause the product to be created, it's just not as much fun for me.
Say that again.
The role of building the product is great. The role of organizing for the product to be built is not something I enjoy.
See, I get into it, and I think because I have built products so many times that to me this is a new challenge.
Interesting. It's not so much that I don't enjoy it, because I certainly enjoyed a lot of that at Circle. But when it starts getting really tough, like I was able to derive this intense motivation from product, like solving the product problems, that I found it much, much more difficult to pull that satisfaction from running the company.
Oh, really? I find it immensely joyous.
Well, this is why in my new company I'm going to be the CTO, and I'm hiring a CEO.
So Paul gets to go do all the fun products.
I get to do all the fun product things, and someone who like really wants to be a CEO is going to get a very unfortunate lesson.
What's the lesson?
No, I'm kidding.
That sounded ominous.
Presumably, I'm going to hire someone who loves being CEO.
I just like feeling that and maybe I'm getting high on my own supply. It's fun to build something that's bigger than yourself.
Thanks for listening to this episode of To Be Continuous, brought to you by Heavybit and hosted by me, Paul Bigger of Circle CI, and Edith Harbaugh of Launch Darkly.
To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com. While you're there, check out their library, home to great educational talks from other developer company founders and industry leaders.